John McDonnell calls for grassroots leadership challenge to Starmer government. In an opinion piece for The Guardian, former Shadow Chancellor says party members, unions and MPs should take back control. Now, bless him, he does try really hard, and I understand his heart is in the right place, but mate, the horse has bolted. This isn't going to work, John. Like, I admire your candor, I admire that you want to at least try, but the reality is that the only way that Keir Starmer ever gets removed as the leader of the Labour Party is by the Parliamentary Labour Party. Members have no say over this until the leadership election, where the whole electoral college of people within the Labour Party have their say on who becomes a new leader. The only way that you remove an existing leader is if the PLP decides to make them and force them step down. And the whole point of the controlled selections for the prospective parliamentary candidates in the run-up to the last election was to ensure loyalty. They tried to excise any potential new MP who would not show total fealty to the Starmer project. Some people slipped through the gaps they didn't expect to win seats, like Brian Leishman in Alloa and Grangemouth, or Neil Duncan Jordan in Poole, who won pretty small majorities in seats they weren't expecting to win otherwise, right? A couple slipped through the net, but the vast majority of the PLP is stuffed, as has been pointed out in chat, with sycophants and bag carriers for the people at the top, for people who are allies with the McSweeney project, or at the very least people who will obey the whips and who will not kick up a fuss and will happily be whipped in line. There is no route to a grassroots challenge to Keir Starmer's leadership of the Labour Party, John. You must know this already. This is why I advocate for the wide-scale bullying of Keir Starmer on the internet. It got Elon to drop out of politics in America. Maybe if you bully Keir Starmer enough, he can drop out of politics in the UK. With people who have unlimited power and no actual kind of mechanism to challenge them, given that they've surrounded themselves with yes men and yes women, right? Then the only way to do so is to force these people to resign out of shame. And I can only see that being the strategy applied to Elon that can be applied to Keir Starmer as well. I mean, this is the opinion piece that he wrote, which is Starmer and co are trashing Labour's legacy. And it's true, they absolutely are. They have severed the links with so many heartland communities of the Labour Party and so many people who should be their base, right? You look at the internal polling for the young people in this country, right? You look at the last YouGov poll that was out today. In the 18 to 24 group, overall, their Westminster voter intention, Lib Dems are at the front with Greens in second. On a constituency basis, the Greens are in first place amongst 18 to 24s, right? And amongst the under 50s, Labour are only on 25% or so, given that in both of these demographics, in both of these cohorts, they were at almost 50% in 2024. They've lost more than half their voters, and amongst young people, since the election. That's a devastating drop in support from what should be the absolute heartland base of the Labour Party in terms of electoral demographics. Like, young people are abandoning them because they see the Labour Party not representing their values anymore, you know? So he's right to call that out. Unfortunately, this project has true believers who have huge amounts of power, not just Morgan McSweeney as well, but there was Liz Lloyd as somebody who's been brought into the fold recently, who was a real kind of fixer for the Blair administration, who goes really hard on briefing against the left, both inside the cabinet and within the backbenchers as well. So whilst he's correct in his assessment of what's happening with the Starmer project, there is no route, as I said before, to change who's at the top of the party. I joined the Labour Party 50 years ago. Back then as a young man, I was proud that I was becoming part of a movement motivated by the highest ideals. I was felt I was joining a group of like-minded people who wanted change for the world for the better, and that whatever setbacks might occur, were on the right side of history, of what Harold Wilson would have described as a moral crusade. The Labour Party is a moral crusade, or it is nothing, you know? That's the kind of history of the Labour I that John McDonnell remembers. I devoted my life to securing the election of Labour governments that would transform our society. I was a working class kid born in the slums of Liverpool to a father who was a docker and a mother who was a cleaner, and I gained all the benefits of Labour's policies, the security of the Parker Morris Standard Council House, and the care of the NHS when I was sick. As a trade union branch secretary, my dad and his fellow members exercised their rights and their solidarity to secure the wage levels that lifted families and workers out of poverty. And he actually went into specifically working as a policy advisor for the trade unions after working in the trades beforehand as well, you know? No matter how tough it was through the worst of the Thatcher period, and especially during the harsh years of Tory austerity, the light of hope still burned in me that eventually Labour would return to power and would be able to get back on the righteous path of social advance for everybody. Keir Starmer was elected leader of the party on the policy platform that Jeremy Corbyn and I developed, and then promptly dropped virtually every policy promise he made. My concern was that dropping a radical programme and narrative in favour of mealy-mouthed politics meant that the Starmer administration would deliver a timid move forward at best. But even then I held the belief that the desperate nature of the Tory inheritance would force him to change course. And this is the problem. So many people thought this, right? I saw economists like Danny Blanchflower saying things like, "Oh, we never expected the Labour Party to be this right wing. How dare you? Like, where's the hope? Where's the change? Where's the the different kind of politics, right?" And yet there was none of this in the manifesto. There was no even basic credence being given to any kind of real change in the run-up to the election. They dumped the policies, as John McDonnell points out, kind of immediately, as soon as Keir Starmer became leader of the party. And you only had to look at the kind of people who was managing his leadership campaign to know what he represented, to know the kind of politics that he really represented, to know the wing of the party that he represented, right? But we did try and tell people you need to vote for Rebecca Long Bailey, but soon people were taken in by the lies. And again, they managed to lie, and they've managed to therefore destroy the party by kicking out everybody who they dislike as well. People who almost certainly probably voted for Keir Starmer, and at least a non-zero amount of the time. What I didn't appreciate was that once elected, the Starmer government wouldn't just be an administration of timid reform, but would rapidly instigate a series of policies that drove a knife into the heart of what I believed Labour stood for when I joined the party. Labour was founded to eliminate poverty and secure equality. After the first King's speech, the government didn't just fail to address the major cause of child poverty in Britain at the moment, the Conservatives' two-child benefit cap, but demanded that Labour MPs vote against its abolition. This was the first time the political incompetence and callousness of the new administration's decision-makers were put on display. To then remove the whip from me and 6 colleagues for voting to scrap the cap showed a remarkable combination of arrogance and lack of judgment. The issue, of course, though, is that the reason why that these particular MPs had the whip removed was because it was essentially spite. It was spite, right? It was the two-child benefit cap and that again, and the whip to abstain on the original welfare reform bill in 2015 by interim leader Harriet Harman that screwed over Andy Burnham and allowed Jeremy Corbyn to win the leadership election that ultimately caused the rift in the Labour Party where the right wing decided they had to retake the party at any costs. They knew that welfare reform was the kind of big dividing line between the left and right of the party. The people who believed that it was the median position of the electorate to cut the welfare state, and the people who fundamentally, ideologically believe that you should never do that regardless whether they believe it's popular or not. And that line is what drove a wedge that allowed Labour Party to be one, that allowed Jeremy Corbyn to win the leadership election, and that's been a sore spot for the Labour right forever, that they almost lost the party over welfare, and so they wanted to make some kind of ritual sacrifice to the gods of austerity to force those who wanted to take the ideological option rather than what they viewed to be the pragmatic option and excise them from the Labour benches, make a symbolic gesture of the split between the old and new party, pre-Starmer, post-Starmer, to exercise the demons of what they believed to be the Corbyn interregnum that should never have happened, It was deliberately being done out of spite to make an example of these people. It wasn't necessarily a lack of judgment, it was specifically because they didn't care about the utility of the policy. They wanted to make an example of the left, which is ironic given that now Keir Starmer in private says that he really wants to get rid of the two-child benefit cap. Other ministers in government are saying it too, and it's apparently more Morgan McSweeney's fault that it's not happening. Well, Keir Starmer was the one who had structured the whips to remove the whip from these people, so he is just as guilty as everybody else for child poverty continuing to increase on the Labour government. At the same time, the public got view of the distasteful sight of Labour ministers accepting gifts, tickets and donations from the rich and corporate carpetbaggers. For that scandal to be followed by the government cutting the benefits for the poorest in our society was nauseating for many Labour supporters. I mean, for the whole country, really, but he is right, Labour supporters especially. But this is the reality of what the sensible grown-ups in the room, as they like to call themselves, see politics as, right? You have to make friends with the organ grinder. You have to go cap in hand to the richest in society, otherwise you're not a serious politician. The remaking of the Labour Party into a corporate party under Blair is what they wanted to return to, because they believed that was the only route to power. You couldn't have mass movement politics. You had to suck up to Murdoch, suck up to all of the big money business people who would support you in government. To become the natural party of government, you needed the support of the rich rather than the support of the many. That was their fundamental belief, right? And so they thought it was politics as usual. They didn't see that it was going to be a problem. The press didn't think it was going to be a problem to start with. They only really kind of cottoned on to Giftgate once it captured the public's imagination, because people didn't realise that these things were still happening in a post-cash for access world, in a post-cash for honours world. We thought we'd, again, exercise those demons, but obviously we hadn't. This has been the reality of politics for ages, if you're on the right of politics. The left don't get that because we stand against the interests of the rich and powerful. It's as simple as that. Following this up with the debacle of the changes to the winter fuel allowance and the brutal attack on disabled people's benefits, which they're not U-turning on, by the way, despite a potential PLP backlash, has disillusioned Labour voters on a scale not seen before in the recent history of the party. It has opened the door to the divisive and destructive opportunism of Nigel Farage, who has now said he would scrap scrap the 2-child benefit cap. Now, it is important to point out, Nigel Farage is winning over non-voters and Tories. He's not really winning over Labour voters. In the current polls at the moment, more Labour voters are deserting them to the Greens than they are to Reform. Reform are winning non-voters mostly. Just want to make that clear. But he's right. These things are absolutely demonic, and Liz Kendall is a destructive and rancid individual. Like, she's just evil. Justifying this negation of the historic role of Labour by adhering to anachronistic fiscal rule doesn't just make the government appear tin-eared, it makes it look inflexibly incompetent. And now what we're witnessing is a panicked, half-hearted policy retreat, while the backroom boys, Morgan McSweeney in the leader's office and Nick Parrott in the deputy leader's office, fight between themselves. All this against a backdrop of defending the export of F-35 fighter jet parts that enabled the IDF to continue bombing Gaza, and a Labour Prime Minister echoing the language of Enoch Powell. Unless party members, affiliated unions and MPs stand up and assert themselves to take back control of Labour, in the next period of its history we may not only lose a government, we could also lose a party. And again, none of his appraisal of what the Labour Party looks like in a post-Starmer, post-McSweeney world is incorrect. This is an entirely correct appraisal of what the Labour Party is currently like, and the oblivion that they are going to head towards if they maintain course in the way that they are. What he's wrong about is the idea that anyone can change this. There's no roots to changing this internally within the party. This is why I have left. I have joined somebody else who actually does stand for the social justice that Labour Party used to stand for before the McSweeney takeover. And you can join us, John, you can join us in the fight for a better world outside the Labour Party, or you can continue banging your head against the brick wall of the captured and inflexible and immovable object of McSweeney at the top of the Labour Party all you want. But unfortunately, I don't think you're going to be very successful, and we need to start organising elsewhere. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.